I'm Jessica, 34, and I still remember the pit in my stomach when I received my sister Amy's wedding invitation with that dreaded +1. After my breakup with Michael, I knew I'd face the wealthy Montgomery clan alone. Their snickers when I walked into that grand ballroom solo cut deep, but nobody expected what happened next when the bride's grandfather approached me. The room fell silent as Mr. Montgomery Sr., patriarch of their dynasty, bowed deeply before me. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe if you want to hear how I went from wedding outcast to the most respected guest overnight. Amy and I grew up thick as thieves in our modest Chicago neighborhood. Our parents worked hard to provide for us, but we never had luxuries. Dad was a high school English teacher and Mom worked as a secretary at a local insurance company. We shared a bedroom until I left for college, whispering our dreams to each other late into the night. I always knew Amy was special. Her gentle heart and quiet determination made her stand out. While Amy pursued nursing, I followed my passion for art history, eventually landing my dream job as a historical art curator at the Harrington Museum. My specialty was 18th century European paintings, with a focus on authentication and restoration. The work consumed me. The meticulous research, the gentle touch needed to bring forgotten masterpieces back to life, the thrill of uncovering the true story behind a mysterious canvas. Most people's eyes glazed over when I talked about pigment analysis or canvas aging patterns, but I didn't care. I'd found my calling. Amy and I remained close despite our different paths. We had Sunday brunches whenever possible, and she'd listen enthusiastically as I rattled on about my latest project. I did the same when she described her patients or her volunteer work at the community clinic. We were different but complementary. I lived in my head, among books and paintings, while Amy lived in her heart, connecting with people. Everything changed when Amy met James Montgomery III at a charity gala where she was volunteering. She texted me that night. Met someone. Different from my usual type. Scary, smart, and kind. James pursued her relentlessly, sending flowers to her apartment, arranging surprise picnics, flying her to New York for dinner. Within 3 months, they were serious. The first time Amy brought James to our Sunday brunch, I was surprised. He didn't match my mental image of the wealthy playboy I'd expected. James was tall, conventionally handsome, but also somewhat awkward, with genuine enthusiasm when discussing his work in sustainable investment. He asked thoughtful questions about my current restoration project, and I could see why Amy had fallen for him. Meeting his family was another story entirely. The Montgomery estate sprawled across 10 acres in the most exclusive suburb of Chicago. The main house looked like something from a historical drama, complete with marble columns and manicured gardens. James' father, James Montgomery Jr., barely looked at me when we were introduced, his handshake limp and dismissive. His mother Margaret's smile never reached her eyes as she assessed my department store dress. "Oh, you work at a museum? How quaint," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I serve on the board of the National Gallery, you know." James' sisters, Madison and Elizabeth, were worse. They whispered behind their hands when I mentioned my apartment in the city's arts district, exchanging knowing glances that made me feel 2 inches tall. They spoke in casual references to people and places I'd never heard of, creating an invisible wall between us. Over the next 6 months, I watched Amy transform. Her wardrobe shifted from comfortable, colorful clothes to muted designer pieces. She started getting regular highlights in her naturally brown hair. She dropped phrases like summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen into conversation. Sometimes when we were together, she'd check her phone anxiously, and I knew she was texting with one of the Montgomerys. "They're just particular about certain things," she explained when I asked if she was happy. "James' family has traditions, expectations. It's important to him that I fit in." I bit my tongue, not wanting to ruin her happiness. But I worried about my sister disappearing into their world. My own world collapsed when Michael, my boyfriend of 3 years, sat me down in our favorite coffee shop and told me he'd fallen for someone else, Rebecca, the new digital archivist at the museum, who was 26 and apparently made him feel alive again. I'd thought we were solid, maybe even heading toward marriage. Instead, I found myself single at 34, watching him pack his things from our shared apartment. The wedding invitation arrived 2 weeks after Michael moved out. Thick cream cardstock embossed with gold, it announced the union of Amy Elizabeth Johnson and James Montgomery III at the Montgomery family estate. And there it was, in elegant script, Jessica Johnson and guest. I stared at those words for a long time. There was no guest. There would be no guest. I'd have to face the Montgomery clan alone, their pitying glances and whispered comments about Amy's spinster sister adding to my humiliation. I considered not going. Maybe I could fake an illness or claim a work emergency. But I couldn't do that to Amy. Despite her transformation, she was still my sister, and I knew she needed me there. The morning of the wedding, I stood before my closet, anxiety churning in my stomach. I'd spent too much money on a deep blue silk dress that highlighted my eyes and hugged my curves without being inappropriate for a formal wedding. I styled my auburn hair in an elegant updo, applied makeup that accentuated my features without being overdone, and put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to our grandmother. Looking in the mirror, I practiced my smile, the one that said I was perfectly fine attending alone, the one that hid the hurt and loneliness. I could do this. One day, I'd be Amy's sister, no matter what the Montgomerys thought of me. The Uber dropped me at the entrance to the Montgomery estate, where a uniformed guard checked my name against the guest list before waving me through the wrought iron gates. The driveway curved through manicured gardens, revealing glimpses of fountains and sculptures that probably cost more than my annual salary. The house itself loomed ahead, a 3-story Georgian mansion with perfect symmetry and imposing columns. Guests were already arriving, stepping out of luxury cars into the June sunshine. Women in designer dresses and spectacular hats glided up the steps on the arms of men in impeccable suits. I clutched my small clutch purse tighter, suddenly very aware of being alone. "Name?" asked a tuxedoed attendant at the door. "Jessica Johnson." "The bride's sister," I added, hating that I felt the need to establish my legitimacy.
"Ah, yes."
"Family is being directed to the East Wing for pre-ceremony gathering." I followed his directions through the grand foyer, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The house was even more impressive inside, soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, artwork that made my professional eye widen in appreciation. I recognized an original Monet hanging casually in the hallway as if it were a family photograph. The East Wing opened into a sun-filled conservatory where about 20 people were gathered. I spotted my parents talking with my aunt and uncle, looking uncomfortable in their wedding finery. Mom had splurged on a new dress for the occasion, but it still looked woefully plain next to the designer outfits surrounding them. "Jessica, you made it." Mom embraced me, relief evident in her voice. "You look beautiful, honey." "Thanks, Mom. You too." I smoothed my dress, suddenly self-conscious. "Can you believe this place?" Dad whispered, gesturing discreetly at our surroundings. I asked where the restroom was and got directed to something called the powder room, which is bigger than our living room. I laughed, feeling some of my tension ease. At least I wasn't facing this alone. The momentary comfort evaporated when I heard a familiar tittering laugh. Madison Montgomery entered the conservatory, followed by her sister Elizabeth and 3 women who could have been clones, all tall, blonde, and wearing pastel designer dresses. Madison spotted me immediately, her eyes flicking over my appearance and then darting to either side, obviously looking for my date. When she registered I was alone, a small, satisfied smile curved her lips. She leaned toward Elizabeth, whispering something that made the entire group glance my way and giggle. "Is that the sister? The museum girl?" One of them stage whispered, not bothering to lower her voice enough. "Came stag to her own sister's wedding. How sad." I felt my cheeks flush. My parents had thankfully moved to greet some distant relatives and hadn't heard the comment. I turned away, pretending to admire a nearby orchid arrangement. "It's Jessica, right?" Madison's voice came from behind me, syrupy sweet. "Love the dress. Department store find." I turned, forcing a smile. "Yes, it's Jessica." "Thank you." No date today? I could have sworn Amy said you were seeing someone. Michael, was it? The casual cruelty took my breath away. Amy must have told them about the breakup. Madison knew exactly what she was doing. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. I lied, unwilling to give her the satisfaction. Such a shame. Elizabeth joined in. James' cousin Parker is single. He's the one over there in the navy suit. Family money, of course, and he just bought the most adorable little yacht. I could introduce you? The offer, dripping with condescension, made it clear they thought I should be grateful for any connection to their world. I'm fine, but thank you, I said, my voice steady despite the anger and humiliation burning in my chest. As I moved away, I overheard Margaret Montgomery speaking to an older woman in the corner. The sister works in a museum, not administration, mind you, but something with the actual paintings. And the parents, he's a schoolteacher, and she's some kind of secretary. Sweet people, of course, but... She trailed off with a meaningful look that spoke volumes. I slipped out of the conservatory, needing air and space. The gardens behind the house stretched into the distance, immaculately tended with geometric precision. I found a stone bench partially hidden by a flowering shrub and sat down, breathing deeply to compose myself. This was only the beginning of the day. How would I survive the ceremony and reception with my dignity intact? I closed my eyes, remembering a summer day when Amy and I were teenagers. We'd gone to the lake, spread a blanket on the sand, and talked for hours about our futures. Amy had wanted to be a nurse even then, passionate about helping people. I'd just discovered art history and couldn't stop talking about a book I'd read on Renaissance painters. We're going to be amazing women, Amy had said, squeezing my hand. Different kinds of amazing, but still. Promise we'll always support each other, no matter what. I promise, I'd replied without hesitation. That memory strengthened me now. I was here for Amy, not to impress the Montgomerys. Jess, are you hiding? I opened my eyes to find Amy standing before me in a silk robe, her hair partially styled, looking worried. Just getting some air, I said, standing to embrace her. Shouldn't you be getting ready? I needed a sister moment. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm so nervous, Jess. Cold feet. I asked, studying her face. No, not about James. He's wonderful. She glanced toward the house. It's just, everything is so big, so formal. Mom's overwhelmed, Dad looks like he wants to disappear, and I just heard Madison making comments about your dress, which is gorgeous, by the way. I squeezed her hands. Don't worry about any of that. This is your day. I'm sorry they're being awful. James has talked to them, but... She sighed. Hey. I tilted her chin up. Remember when I had stage fright before the 5th grade talent show? What did you tell me? A small smile curved her lips. That you should imagine everyone in their underwear? And that I was amazing just being me, and anyone who couldn't see that didn't deserve my time. I returned her smile. You were right then, and it's still true now. For both of us. Amy hugged me fiercely. I'm so glad you're here, Jess. I couldn't do this without you. You'll never have to find out, I promised. Now go get beautiful. Even though you already are. As she hurried back to the house, I straightened my shoulders. I could endure the Montgomerys' condescension for Amy's sake. I would hold my head high and remember my worth, regardless of their opinion. The Montgomery family chapel stood at the edge of the property, a stone building with stained glass windows that cast rainbow patterns across the white aisle runner. I sat on the bride's side, which was noticeably less populated than the groom's. Amy and James had kept the guest list relatively small at 150 people, but it seemed most of those guests were James' connections. On our side, our parents, a handful of relatives, Amy's nursing school friends, and a few childhood neighbors. On the Montgomery side, Chicago's elite, politicians, CEOs, and what appeared to be minor European royalty based on the accents I overheard. The string quartet began playing, signaling the start of the ceremony. James entered with the minister, looking handsome and nervous in his tuxedo. His groomsmen followed, his college roommate, 2 cousins, and his best friend from prep school. Then came the bridesmaids, including Madison and Elizabeth, who had somehow convinced Amy to let them participate. I wasn't in the wedding party. Amy had tearfully explained that James' mother insisted the numbers be even, and since I didn't have a partner to walk with, I pushed away the hurt. This wasn't about me. When Amy appeared on our father's arm, a collective murmur of appreciation rippled through the chapel. She was radiant in a classic gown of silk and lace, her face glowing with happiness behind her veil. Dad looked both proud and emotional, his eyes glistening as he prepared to give his daughter away. The ceremony was traditional and moving. I found myself blinking back tears as Amy and James exchanged vows they had written themselves. Despite my reservations about his family, I could see the genuine love between them. When they were pronounced husband and wife, I cheered along with everyone else, momentarily forgetting my discomfort. The reception was held in a massive tent erected on the back lawn, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and centerpieces of white orchids and roses on every table. A jazz band played softly as guests made their way from the chapel. I lingered outside, gathering my courage before entering alone. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and walked through the tent entrance. The conversation nearest the door faltered as Madison nudged her husband and nodded in my direction. "Looks like the museum curator couldn't curate herself a date," she said, just loud enough for me to hear. Several people laughed, including Elizabeth's husband and 2 of James' cousins. I felt my face flush but kept walking, searching for my assigned table. "Really, coming alone to a wedding this significant?" I heard James Montgomery Jr. say to another man as I passed. "I suppose that's what happens when you don't move in the right circles." Amy's family seems nice enough, but clearly lacking proper connections. I spotted my name card on a table at the far edge of the tent, as distant from the head table as possible while still being under the same roof. My tablemates were already seated. An elderly man who introduced himself as Professor Harold Wilson, a retired art history lecturer, Beatrice Murphy, a retired nurse who had mentored Amy, Diana Rodriguez, a former neighbor of ours, and Gabriel Chun, who described himself as the token diversity hire at Montgomery Investment Group, with a wry smile that suggested we might become allies. The sister of the bride," Harold said warmly, standing to pull out my chair. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Amy speaks highly of your work at the Harrington." "Thank you," I said, touched by his courtesy after the frosty reception I'd received elsewhere. "Honey, I saw those Montgomery girls snickering when you walked in," Beatrice said bluntly. "Don't you let them get to you. They were born on third base, thinking they hit a triple." I laughed, relaxing for the first time since arriving. "I appreciate that. We're the misfit table," Gabriel explained, raising his champagne glass. "I work for James, but didn't attend the right schools. Harold taught at a state university, not Ivy League. Beatrice is from the wrong side of town. And Diana here once corrected Margaret Montgomery's pronunciation at a charity event. I've been in social Siberia ever since," Diana confirmed cheerfully. "Worth it, though." As dinner was served, I found myself enjoying the company of my tablemates. Harold and I had a fascinating discussion about a controversial authentication of a Vermeer painting. Gabriel shared hilarious stories about the Montgomery corporate culture. Diana and Beatrice reminisced about our old neighborhood. "Look at that old man watching you," Beatrice said suddenly, nodding toward the head table. I followed her gaze to see an elderly gentleman I hadn't noticed before. He sat at the center of the head table, between Margaret Montgomery and a much younger woman I assumed was his nurse or companion. His full head of white hair and piercing blue eyes gave him a distinguished appearance despite his obvious age. He was indeed watching me with open curiosity. "That's William Montgomery Sr., Gabriel whispered. "The founder of the Montgomery fortune. Rarely appears in public anymore due to health issues." Everyone was shocked when he confirmed he'd attend the wedding. "He's quite a character," Harold added. "Built an empire from nothing, unlike his son who was born into it. Very interested in art and history." The old man continued to watch me throughout the dinner and speeches. during James' father's long-winded toast about the joining of two compatible families, with emphasis suggesting he didn't really believe this, I happened to make eye contact with William Montgomery Sr. To my surprise, he gave me a small, conspiratorial smile, as if sharing a private joke about his son's pomposity. After the meal, as guests began to mingle and the dance floor opened, I saw William Montgomery Sr. rise from his seat with the help of a sleek carbon fiber cane. He spoke briefly to his companion, then made his way deliberately across the tent, directly toward our table. Conversation at surrounding tables quieted as people noticed his movement. By the time he reached us, a hush had fallen over our section of the reception. "Miss Johnson." His voice was stronger than I expected, with a slight accent I couldn't place. I stood, smoothing my dress nervously. "Yes, sir. Jessica Johnson. William Montgomery." He extended his hand, which I shook carefully, aware of its papery texture and prominent veins. "I understand you are a curator at the Harrington Museum, specializing in 18th century European art." "That's correct," I replied, surprised he knew this detail. "In the authentication department, yes? Restoration as well?" "Yes, sir." He studied my face intently. "Did you, by chance, work on a Fragonard piece approximately 8 months ago? A pastoral scene with distinctive golden light and a hidden figure in the forest background." My heart began to race. "The afternoon in Montmorency." "Yes, I led the authentication and restoration project. It was donated anonymously to our museum last year." William Montgomery's expression changed dramatically. Shock, then something like reverence crossed his features. To my complete astonishment, he lowered himself into a deep, formal bow before me. The tent fell absolutely silent. From the corner of my eye, I could see James' parents frozen in horrified disbelief, Madison with her champagne glass halfway to her mouth, and Amy looking utterly confused. When William straightened, he spoke in a voice designed to carry. "Miss Johnson, I find myself in the presence of greatness. The work you did on that painting was nothing short of miraculous. I have been looking for that piece for over 40 years. The silence that followed William Montgomery's declaration seemed to stretch endlessly. I stood rooted to the spot, acutely aware of every eye in the tent fixed on us. My cheeks burned, not from embarrassment now, but from the intensity of the moment. "I thank you, Mr. Montgomery," I finally managed. The Fragonard was a challenging project, but deeply rewarding. "Challenging." William gave a short laugh. "Young lady, that painting was considered lost forever. 3 previous experts declared it beyond salvation, and 2 more claimed it was a forgery altogether. Yet you restored it to its original glory and definitively proved its provenance. That requires more than skill, it requires vision." From across the tent, James Montgomery Jr. had recovered enough to approach us, his wife Margaret trailing behind with a fixed smile that couldn't hide her confusion. "Father, perhaps you'd like to return to your seat? I'm sure Miss Johnson appreciates your enthusiasm for her hobby." William turned to his son, his expression hardening. "This is not a hobby, Junior. This is scholarship of the highest order." He turned back to me. "Tell me, how did you determine it was authentic when so many others failed?" Aware of the audience, but unable to resist discussing my work with someone who clearly understood its significance, I explained, the key was in the underpainting. Fragonard had a distinctive way of laying down his initial pigments, almost like a signature. When I examined it under multispectral imaging, I found his characteristic ochre base layer. Plus, there were pencil marks in the margins with his handwriting, only visible under UV light. William's eyes lit up. "Extraordinary. And the damage to the lower right quadrant? It looked irreparable in the photographs I saw before the restoration. That required microfilling techniques and pigment matching from other sections. I actually created a custom blend based on spectroscopic analysis of the original pigments." William was nodding enthusiastically. "Innovative. Absolutely innovative." James Jr. cleared his throat loudly. "Father, while this is fascinating, we are in the middle of James and Amy's wedding reception. William waved his hand dismissively. Yes, yes. A lovely wedding. But do you understand what's happening here, Junior? This young woman restored the Montgomery legacy. The painting your great-grandmother brought from France, the one your grandfather used as collateral to secure the loan that started our shipping business. A murmur rippled through the guests. I glanced at my table mates, who looked as stunned as I felt. Gabriel gave me an encouraging nod. Miss Johnson, William continued, that painting has been in our family for generations. It disappeared during a house fire in 1979. We thought it was destroyed, but apparently, it survived and changed hands several times before being donated to your museum. It was anonymous, I said softly. We had no idea of its history. Of course not. But its return to public view, in its full glory, means everything. He turned to address the room at large. The Montgomery fortune didn't begin with hedge funds or real estate, as many assume. It began with that painting, Afternoon in Montmorency, which my mother brought to America and my father used to secure our first business loan. Without it, there would be no Montgomery Industries, no family estate, no legacy. The weight of his words settled over the reception. I saw James Jr. S. face redden with either embarrassment or anger, perhaps both. William turned back to me. Miss Johnson, would you do me the honor of joining me at the family table? I have so many questions about your restoration process. Before I could respond, he offered his arm, clearly expecting me to accompany him. In a daze, I placed my hand on his sleeve, nodding goodbye to my table mates. Go, Beatrice whispered with a grin. This is better than any soap opera. The walk across the reception tent felt surreal. Guests whispered behind their hands as we passed. I caught fragments. Who is she again? The bride's sister? Restored some important painting? Never seen the old man so animated. At the head table, William instructed his nurse to move, so I could sit beside him. Margaret Montgomery looked like she had swallowed something sour, but didn't protest. Madison and Elizabeth stared openly, their previous mockery replaced by calculated interest. Now, William said once I was seated, tell me about the cleaning process. The varnish must have been severely deteriorated. As I described the painstaking removal of layers of discolored varnish, I noticed Amy watching me from her seat next to James. She gave me a small, puzzled smile, which I returned with a tiny shrug. I was as surprised by this turn of events as anyone. For the next half hour, William and I discussed art preservation techniques, the history of the Fragonard painting, and my career path. He listened intently, asking informed questions that revealed his deep knowledge of art history. The Montgomery collection once included over 30 significant works, he told me. Over the years, Junior and his wife have sold most of them to fund their lifestyle, despite my objections. They never understood their true value, not just monetary but historical and cultural. That's unfortunate, I said carefully, aware that his son might overhear. Indeed. The Fragonard was the crown jewel, presumed lost in the fire. Its reappearance is... He paused, his eyes suddenly bright with emotion. Well, it feels like a sign. Throughout our conversation, I noticed the Montgomery family members making repeated attempts to join us, only to be waved away by William. Margaret approached with a society friend she clearly wanted to introduce, but William dismissed her with a curt, "Not now, Margaret. Miss Johnson and I are discussing important matters." The woman who had been sitting beside William earlier, not a nurse, I learned, but his personal assistant Sophia, leaned over at one point to whisper something in his ear. He nodded and turned to me. Sophia reminds me I'm monopolizing your time at your sister's wedding. You should enjoy the celebration. But I would be honored if you would save a dance for an old man later. The honor would be mine, I replied, genuinely meaning it. As I rose to leave, William caught my hand. Miss Johnson, Jessica, thank you. Not just for the conversation, but for your work. You've preserved something precious to my family, something I thought was lost forever. The sincerity in his voice touched me deeply. That's why I do what I do, Mr. Montgomery. To preserve beauty and history for future generations. As I walked away from the head table, I found myself intercepted by Margaret Montgomery, who had clearly been waiting for an opportunity to speak with me. "Jessica, dear," she said, her voice honey-sweet now. "What a delightful surprise to learn about your work on a piece so meaningful to our family. You must tell me more about your role at the museum." The same woman who had earlier dismissed my career as quaint now gazed at me with newfound interest. Behind her, I could see Madison and Elizabeth watching, their expressions calculating. "I'd be happy to discuss it another time, Mrs. Montgomery," I said politely. "Right now, I'd like to congratulate my sister and your son." I moved away before she could respond, making my way to where Amy and James stood greeting guests. Amy embraced me tightly. "What was that all about?" she whispered. "One minute you're at the back table, the next you're deep in conversation with James' grandfather, and now his mother is following you around like you're royalty." "It's a long story involving a painting," I said, laughing at the absurdity of it all. "I'll explain later. Congratulations, by the way. The ceremony was beautiful." James shook my hand with newfound respect in his eyes. "Grandfather rarely takes to people that way. He must think very highly of your work." "Your grandfather is a remarkable man," I replied sincerely. "He knows a great deal about art history." "More than the rest of us," James admitted. "I'm sorry if my family has been less than welcoming. They can be judgmental." The simple acknowledgement, lacking excuses or justifications, raised my opinion of James considerably. Maybe my sister had chosen well after all. As I moved away to let other guests offer their congratulations, I found myself surrounded by people who had ignored me earlier. James' father actually introduced himself properly, as if we hadn't already met. Business associates of the Montgomery family suddenly found my profession fascinating. Madison's husband asked if I would consider evaluating a painting in their home. The attention was flattering but transparently self-interested. These people had judged me based on my perceived social status and found me wanting. Now that William Montgomery had publicly shown me respect, they were scrambling to recalibrate their assessment. I excused myself and headed for the bar, needing a moment to process the dramatic shift in my reception experience. "Quite the reversal of fortune," said a voice beside me. Gabriel from my original table had appeared at my elbow. "1 minute social outcast, next minute Montgomery family darling." "It's giving me whiplash," I admitted, accepting a glass of champagne from the bartender. "Old man Montgomery doesn't suffer fools, and he doesn't give praise lightly," Gabriel told me. "If he respects you, it's because you've earned it. Just be careful. The rest of them will try to use you now." "I've noticed," I said dryly, watching as Elizabeth Montgomery made her way toward us with determined strides. Gabriel winked. "Good luck. I'll save you a dance later if you need rescuing." As he disappeared into the crowd, Elizabeth arrived, beaming as if we were old friends. "Jessica, I've been looking everywhere for you. You simply must join us at the lake house next weekend. A small gathering, very exclusive. I can't believe we've never properly gotten to know Amy's brilliant sister." I smiled politely, wondering what Amy would make of all this when I finally got to tell her the full story. When William Montgomery invited me to rejoin him at the head table for the cake cutting, I couldn't politely refuse. As I made my way across the reception for the second time, I felt the stares of the guests, some curious, others envious, a few openly hostile. The walk felt symbolic somehow, crossing from one world to another, from outsider to insider, though I wasn't sure I wanted to be an insider in this particular circle. William patted the chair beside him.
"Come, sit."
Junior is about to make another speech, and I'll need intelligent company to endure it. I suppressed a smile at his candor. As I took my seat, Margaret leaned across the table, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Jessica, dear, we're having a small family gathering next Sunday. Nothing formal, just brunch at the house. We'd love for you to join us." Her tone suggested she was bestowing a rare honor. "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Montgomery. I'll check my schedule," I replied noncommittally. William snorted softly beside me. "Margaret, the girl doesn't want to spend her Sunday listening to you and your friends discuss charity galas and country club politics." Margaret's smile tightened. Father William, I'm simply trying to include Jessica in family activities now that Amy has joined us. Now that you know she's valuable to me, you mean? William corrected bluntly. Let's not pretend you showed any interest in her expertise or company before today. Margaret flushed, and I felt a stab of sympathy despite her previous treatment of me. William Montgomery didn't mince words. It's quite all right, I said diplomatically. Family dynamics can be complicated, especially around weddings. William patted my hand approvingly. Gracious as well as brilliant. Now I have a proposition for you, Jessica. The Montgomery family still has several important pieces in storage, works that Junior hasn't managed to sell off yet. I'd like your professional opinion on their condition and authenticity. I'd be happy to take a look, I offered, genuinely interested. Excellent. Perhaps next week? I'll have Sophia arrange everything. James Jr. approached the table then, his expression strained. Father, a word, please? William sighed dramatically, but allowed his son to wheel his chair a short distance away. Though they spoke in hushed tones, the tension in their body language was evident. James Jr. gesticulated forcefully, while William remained impassive, occasionally shaking his head. Madison slid into the vacant seat beside me. So, Jessica, grandfather seems quite taken with you. We share an interest in historical art, I said simply.
Yes.
Quite fortunate for you that our family painting ended up at your museum. The insinuation in her tone was clear. The donation was anonymous, Madison. I had no idea of its connection to your family until today. Of course, she said, not sounding convinced. It's just such a coincidence. And now grandfather is offering you access to the family collection? That's a significant opportunity for someone in your position. Before I could respond, William returned, his expression thunderous. Madison, return to your seat. Jessica and I were having a private conversation. Madison retreated immediately, leaving William to exhale heavily beside me. My apologies for my family's behavior. Junior is concerned I'm being manipulated by you. He rolled his eyes. As if I haven't spent decades navigating people trying to manipulate me for my money and influence. I assure you, that's not my intention, I said, feeling uncomfortable. I know that. William's expression softened. That's precisely why I find your company refreshing. You value the art for its own sake, not for its price tag. Junior never understood that distinction. The cake cutting provided a welcome distraction. Amy and James performed the traditional ritual, feeding each other small bites amid laughter and applause. Looking at my sister's radiant face, I felt a pang of guilt for being distracted from her special day by the Montgomery family drama. After the cake, William insisted I accompany him on a brief tour of the nearby conservatory, which housed some of the remaining Montgomery art collection. His assistant Sophia pushed his wheelchair as he pointed out various paintings and sculptures, providing fascinating historical context for each piece. This Monet was acquired by my father in 1952, he explained, indicating a small but exquisite water lily scene. And this sculpture came from a Venetian palazzo. My wife Catherine fell in love with it on our honeymoon. The way he spoke about the art, with knowledge but also deep personal connection, resonated with me. For William, these weren't status symbols or investment vehicles. They were repositories of memory and meaning. As we returned to the reception, we encountered James Jr. and Margaret in heated discussion with Amy. My sister looked distressed, and I immediately moved toward her. Is everything all right? Amy gave me a strained smile.
Fine.
We're just discussing some family matters. They're discussing your relationship with me, William clarified bluntly. Junior is concerned you've captured my interest for nefarious purposes. James Jr.'s face reddened. Father, that's not exactly, isn't it? William cut him off. You suggested Jessica intentionally cultivated a connection to our family through her sister, somehow orchestrated the Fragonard restoration knowing its significance to us, and is now trying to ingratiate herself with me. The absurdity of the accusation left me speechless. I simply said it seems convenient. James Jr. backpedaled, avoiding my gaze. And I simply say you're being ridiculous, William retorted. Jessica had no way of knowing the painting's connection to us. The donation was anonymous. I verified that with the museum director while you were making your interminable speech. Amy placed her hand on my arm.
I'm sorry, Zess.
This is all getting out of hand. It's not your fault, I assured her. William turned to Amy with unexpected gentleness. My dear, your sister is an extraordinary talent who preserved a piece of my family's history. I'm simply acknowledging that fact. Unfortunately, some members of your new family measure everything solely in terms of advantage and disadvantage. James approached, looking concerned. What's going on? Amy, are you okay? Just a small family discussion, William said. Perhaps you could take your lovely bride for a dance while I continue my conversation with Jessica. James hesitated, looking between his parents and grandfather. Then he nodded, taking Amy's hand. Good idea. This is supposed to be a celebration, not a boardroom meeting. As they moved toward the dance floor, William turned to James Jr. and Margaret. This behavior stops now. Jessica is a guest at this wedding and an important connection for our family's artistic heritage. You will treat her with respect, not suspicion. The authority in his voice was unmistakable. James Jr. and Margaret exchanged glances before nodding stiffly and moving away. I apologize for putting you in this uncomfortable position, I said once they were gone. Perhaps I should return to my original table. Nonsense, William replied firmly. Junior needs to be reminded occasionally that the Montgomery name stands for more than just money. There was a time when our family valued art, education, and contribution to society. He sighed. I fear those values have been diluted with each generation. As the evening progressed, I divided my time between my new friends at the misfit table and conversations with William. True to my promise, I shared one dance with him, a slow number where he could remain seated while I stood beside his wheelchair, his hand lightly holding mine as we swayed to the music. Tell me about your sister, he requested during our dance. She must be quite special to have captured my grandson's heart. I smiled, relieved to discuss something other than art or family tensions. Amy has always been the compassionate one. Even as children, she was the neighborhood mediator, the one who rescued injured birds and befriended the lonely kids. She became a nurse because she genuinely wants to help people, and she's adapted to the Montgomery world. His tone suggested he knew this couldn't have been easy. She's trying, I said carefully. Amy tends to see the best in people and situations. Unlike you? His blue eyes twinkled with perception. I laughed. I suppose I'm more analytical. Occupational hazard of authentication work. I'm trained to look for inconsistencies, to question what appears genuine on the surface. A valuable skill, in art and in life, William observed. Your sister is fortunate to have you watching out for her. As the dance ended, I spotted Madison and Elizabeth by the bar, watching us intently. When they realized I'd noticed, they approached with determined smiles. Jessica, we feel terrible about how things started today, Elizabeth began, her voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. Absolutely, Madison chimed in. We had no idea about your important work with grandfather's painting. We should all get together soon, Elizabeth continued. Shopping, perhaps? I know the most exclusive boutiques in the city. Their transparent attempt at social climbing, positioning themselves as my new best friends now that William had elevated my status, was almost comical. Thank you for the thought, I said neutrally. If you'll excuse me, I should check on my parents. As I walked away, I heard William's assistant Sophia behind me. Miss Johnson? Mr. Montgomery would like a word before he leaves. He tires easily and will be departing shortly. I followed her to a quiet corner where William waited, looking weary but alert. Jessica, this has been the most stimulating conversation I've had in years. I'd like to continue our discussion about the Montgomery collection soon. Would next Tuesday, at my downtown residence, suit you? I rarely visit the family estate these days. Too many stairs for these old bones. Tuesday would be fine. I agreed, touched by his genuine interest in my professional opinion. Excellent. He handed me a business card with elegant embossing. My private number. Call Sophia to arrange the details. He paused, studying me. And Jessica? Don't let my family's sudden interest in your friendship fool you. They're interested in what you represent to me, not in who you are. I understand, I said, appreciating his candor.
Good.
You're a perceptive young woman. Perhaps you can help my grandson and your sister navigate this family with their values intact.
He squeezed my hand.
It was truly a pleasure meeting you. As Sophia wheeled him toward the exit, I stood watching, still processing the extraordinary turn this wedding had taken. From dismissed outsider to valued expert in the span of a few hours, all because of a painting I'd restored without knowing its significance. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Montgomerys had judged me based on superficial factors, my job, my single status, my lack of connections. Yet it was my work, my expertise, my passion that had ultimately earned their patriarch's respect. As I turned back toward the reception, I caught sight of Amy watching me from across the room. Her expression was a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and something else, perhaps a new awareness of how complicated her married life might be. I gave her a reassuring smile, promising silently that no matter what happened with the Montgomerys, she could always count on me. The reception continued into the night, transformed by the earlier revelations. Where I had once been virtually invisible, I now found myself the object of intense interest. Guests who had previously ignored me sought introductions, asking about my work and my friendship with William Montgomery Sr. Margaret approached as I was speaking with Harold from my original table. Jessica, I want to apologize for any misunderstanding earlier. The Montgomery family has always valued culture and the arts. She glanced around to ensure others could overhear her performance of inclusivity. Thank you, Mrs. Montgomery, I replied, keeping my tone pleasant but non-committal. Margaret, please, she insisted. We're family now. And do call me about that brunch on Sunday. As she drifted away, Harold chuckled. Remarkable how quickly people recalibrate when the power dynamics shift. It's not genuine, I said quietly. They're only interested because William values my expertise. Does that bother you? Harold asked perceptively. I considered the question. What bothers me is that they judged me without knowing anything about me. My worth as a person shouldn't depend on William Montgomery's approval or my professional accomplishments. Well said. Harold nodded approvingly. Though I must admit, watching those society princesses scramble to befriend you has been the highlight of my evening. I laughed, feeling some of the tension ease. Mine too, actually. Madison intercepted me on my way to the restroom, her husband in tow. Jessica, Richard and I were just discussing that painting you might look at for us. It's been in his family for generations, possibly a Gainsborough, though we're not certain. If it's important to you, I'd be happy to take a look, I offered, trying to remain professional despite my lingering resentment of her earlier behavior. Wonderful. We'll set something up soon. She lowered her voice confidentially. And just between us, grandfather rarely gets so animated these days. You've clearly made quite an impression. The implication was clear. I now had influence with the family patriarch, making me someone to cultivate rather than mock. If you'll excuse me, I said, moving past them toward the restroom. Once alone in the elegant powder room, I stared at my reflection in the gilded mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared composed and confident, giving no indication of the emotional turbulence beneath the surface. The day had been a roller coaster, from dreading attending alone to being humiliated by the Montgomery clan to suddenly finding myself elevated to honored guest. The door opened, and Amy slipped in, her wedding gown rustling. Finally caught you alone. What is happening out there? James' mother just told me you're coming to family brunch on Sunday. I laughed, shaking my head. It's been the strangest day. Tell me everything, Amy insisted. I explained about the Fragonard painting, its significance to the Montgomery family, and William's reaction to learning I was the one who had restored it. So that painting in your lab, the one you worked on for months last year, was actually a long-lost Montgomery family treasure? Amy's eyes widened. That's incredible, Jess. Pure coincidence, I assured her. I had no idea until William recognized it from my description. And now they're all falling over themselves to be nice to you. Amy shook her head. I'm so sorry about how they treated you before. It's not your fault, I said, squeezing her hand. Still. Amy looked troubled. I should have stood up for you more. When they insisted you couldn't be in the wedding party because you didn't have a date, when they seated you at the farthest table, I just kept trying to keep the peace. Hey. I turned her to face me. This is your wedding day. You shouldn't be worrying about any of this. But that's just it. Amy's eyes filled with tears. I've been so focused on fitting in with James' family, on not making waves, that I let them disrespect you. What kind of sister does that make me? I hugged her carefully, mindful of her dress. The kind who's figuring out a complicated new family dynamic. It's okay, Amy. Really. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. It's not okay. I love James, but I hate how his family can be sometimes. Even he gets uncomfortable with it. James seems like a good man, I said sincerely. And William is certainly interesting. Amy smiled. James adores his grandfather. Says he's the only truly authentic person in the family. She checked her makeup in the mirror. We should get back. They'll be doing the bouquet toss soon. Can't miss that, I said dryly. When we returned to the reception, James immediately came to Amy's side, looking concerned. Everything okay? Just sister talk, Amy assured him with a smile. Jessica. James turned to me. I want to apologize for my family's behavior today. There's no excuse for how you were treated. His direct acknowledgement, without excuses or qualifications, raised my opinion of him considerably. Thank you, James. That means a lot. Grandfather speaks very highly of you, he continued. He rarely connects with people that way anymore. Most just see his money or the Montgomery name. He's a fascinating man, I said. His knowledge of art history is impressive. James nodded. He wanted things to be different for this generation of Montgomerys. More substance, less status-seeking. I'm trying, but... He glanced toward his parents, who were entertaining a group of obviously important guests. You seem to be doing all right, I told him, genuinely meaning it. The DJ announced it was time for the bouquet toss. Amy winked at me as she took her position. Single women gathered on the dance floor, including, I noticed with amusement, several who had previously snubbed me, but now made sure to stand nearby. When Amy turned and tossed her bouquet, it sailed over the reaching hands in front and landed squarely in my arms. A cheer went up, and Amy rushed over to hug me. Plan that, she whispered mischievously. Elizabeth appeared at my elbow. How lucky. Now we absolutely must introduce you to James' cousin Parker. He's recently divorced but very eligible. I bit back a sarcastic reply, settling for a polite smile. I'm not really looking right now. The reception was winding down when James Jr. approached me, his expression carefully neutral. Jessica, I owe you an apology. My comments earlier were inappropriate. Our family has always valued art and culture, and your work in preserving our heritage is commendable. The rehearsed quality of his words suggested Margaret had sent him on this diplomatic mission. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. James, please, he insisted. You'll be joining us for brunch on Sunday? I haven't decided yet, I said honestly. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Father would be disappointed if you declined. He's quite taken with you. And there it was, the real reason for the apology and invitation. Not genuine remorse or interest in me as a person, but concern about disappointing William, who clearly still held significant influence in the family. I'll consider it, I replied. As guests began to leave, I found myself drafted into the farewell line beside Amy and James. The contrast from my arrival was stark. Now guests made a point of speaking to me, commenting on my fascinating work, and expressing hopes to see me at future Montgomery gatherings. When the last guest had departed, Amy kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. Finally, these shoes are gorgeous but lethal. James laughed, loosening his tie. You were amazing today, he told her, his expression softening as he looked at my sister. We all were, Amy said, linking arms with both of us. My two favorite people. Her simple gesture of inclusion touched me deeply. Despite the complications, despite the Montgomery family dynamics, Amy was still my sister. And James, I was beginning to believe, might be worthy of her after all. I should head out, I said, checking the time. It's late, and you two have an early flight tomorrow. Let me call you a car, James insisted, pulling out his phone. As we waited for the car to arrive, Amy hugged me tightly. Thank you for being here today, Jess. It wouldn't have been the same without you. I wouldn't have missed it, I assured her. Even with all the drama. Especially with all the drama, she teased. Who knew my big sister would end up the star of my wedding? I laughed, relieved that she could joke about it. Hardly the star. That was definitely you. When the car arrived, James surprised me by giving me a warm hug. Welcome to the family, Jessica. The real family, not the social circus. His words suggested he saw the distinction between the Montgomery name and the Montgomery values more clearly than I had given him credit for. As the car pulled away from the Montgomery estate, I gazed back at the illuminated mansion growing smaller in the distance. I had arrived this morning dreading the day ahead, certain I would be an outsider looking in. I was leaving with a new connection to a remarkable old man, a deeper understanding of my sister's new husband, and a reminder that true worth isn't determined by social status or connections. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very profession the Montgomerys had initially dismissed had been the key to earning their respect. But more importantly, it had been a reminder to myself of my own value, independent of others' perceptions. Pulling out my phone, I sent Amy a quick text. Proud of you today. Love you. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I added William Montgomery's contact information to my phone. Something told me our connection was just beginning. The week following Amy's wedding was surreal. I returned to my normal routine at the museum, but my phone buzzed constantly with messages from my newfound friends in the Montgomery circle. Madison invited me to lunch at an exclusive club. Elizabeth suggested shopping at boutiques I couldn't afford. Even Margaret called personally to remind me about Sunday brunch. I declined all invitations except one, Tuesday afternoon with William Montgomery Sr. at his downtown residence. Unlike the others, his interest felt genuine, rooted in shared passion rather than social calculation. His penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a historic building overlooking the lake. The space was surprisingly understated, elegant but comfortable, with walls lined with bookshelves rather than ostentatious displays of wealth. Most striking were the paintings, museum-quality works arranged not for show but for personal enjoyment. Jessica, welcome. William greeted me from his wheelchair, looking more relaxed in casual clothes than he had at the wedding. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, I replied, genuinely pleased to see him. Sophia served tea while William and I discussed the Montgomery collection. He showed me photographs of pieces in storage, explaining their provenance and significance to his family history. The problem, he explained, is that Junior and Margaret see these only as assets on a balance sheet. They've sold several important works against my wishes. That must be difficult, I said, understanding his frustration as both a collector and a preservationist. It's more than that. William set down his teacup, his expression grave. These pieces tell our family story. When I built this company, I promised myself that wealth would never be our only legacy. The Montgomerys would stand for culture, education, historical preservation. He gazed out the window at the city skyline. Each generation has moved further from that vision. Junior cares only for status and connections. His children are worse, entitled without accomplishment, judgmental without wisdom. James seems different, I offered. William's expression softened. James gives me hope. He has substance beneath the Montgomery polish. Your sister must be quite special to have captured his attention. She is, I agreed. Amy sees the good in everyone, including my family, despite their behavior toward you. William raised an eyebrow. I smiled. Amy believes people can change. A lovely sentiment. William didn't sound convinced. Now, I have a proposition for you. The Montgomery Foundation needs a curator for our private collection, someone to catalog, preserve, and occasionally arrange public exhibitions of selected works. I'd like to offer you the position. The offer took me by surprise. That's very generous, but I'm happy at the Harrington. This would be in addition to your museum work, a consulting role with significant creative control and, I might add, compensation commensurate with your expertise. He named a figure that made me blink. More importantly, you'd be preserving pieces that might otherwise be sold off or neglected. I'm honored, I said truthfully. May I think about it? Of course. William studied me with those piercing blue eyes. You're concerned about how it might appear, accepting a position from a family that snubbed you until they discovered your value to me. His perception was unsettling. Something like that. Integrity. William nodded approvingly. Rare in my circle. Take your time deciding. The offer stands regardless of your relationship with the rest of the family. I left our meeting with much to consider. The professional opportunity was extraordinary, but I worried about becoming entangled in Montgomery family politics. More fundamentally, I questioned whether accepting would mean tacitly forgiving how they had treated me. Sunday brunch at the Montgomery estate presented another dilemma. Part of me wanted to decline on principle. Another part was curious to see how the family dynamics had evolved. In the end, I decided to go, not for the Montgomerys, but for Amy, who had texted asking me to please come and save me from doing this alone. The reception was markedly different from my previous visit. Margaret greeted me effusively, air-kissing both cheeks, as if we were old friends. James Jr. personally gave me a tour of the main house, pointing out architectural details and artwork with newfound respect for my expertise. Madison and Elizabeth hovered nearby, including me in inside jokes, as if we'd been confidants for years. Their transparent attempt to integrate me into their circle might have been amusing if it wasn't so calculated. Only James seemed genuine, quietly rolling his eyes at his family's performance while helping Amy carry a tray of mimosas. How was the honeymoon? I asked them when I could pull them aside. Amazing, Amy beamed. The Maldives were paradise. It was nice to be away from all this, James admitted, gesturing vaguely at his family. Just us, being normal. Normal is underrated, I agreed, making them both laugh. William arrived midway through brunch, immediately changing the dynamic. The family deferred to him automatically, their carefully orchestrated social performance adjusting to account for his presence. Jessica, he called from across the room. Come tell me if this Renoir is properly lit. Junior insists on hanging it in direct sunlight despite my objections. As I moved to join him, I caught Amy watching me with a mixture of amusement and wonder. My little sister, who had always been the socially adept one, seemed amazed by my newfound status in her new family. The following weeks established a pattern. I continued my work at the museum while considering William's offer. I joined Amy and James for dinner occasionally, getting to know my new brother-in-law better. I politely declined most invitations from the wider Montgomery circle, but developed a genuine friendship with William, visiting him regularly to discuss art and history. A month after the wedding, I had lunch with Amy at our favorite cafe. She looked happier and more relaxed than she had during the wedding preparations. James and I are looking for our own place, she announced. Something in the city, not in the suburbs near his parents. That's great, I said, genuinely pleased. Your own space. We need it. Amy stirred her coffee thoughtfully. The family can be intense. James feels it too, the pressure to live a certain way, maintain appearances. How are things with the in-laws? I asked carefully. Amy laughed. Funny you should ask. They talk about you constantly. Jessica's coming to the charity auction, right? Has Jessica accepted grandfather's offer yet? It's like you're the daughter they always wanted. That's not true, I protested. No, but you have something they respect, grandfather's approval and expertise they can't buy. Amy reached for my hand. I'm not jealous, Jess. I think it's hilarious and well-deserved after how they treated you. I'm still deciding about William's offer, I admitted. The opportunity is amazing, but I'm not sure I want to be more connected to the family. Except James, Amy added with a smile. You like him now, admit it. He's growing on me, I conceded. He treats you well, and he's more self-aware than the rest of them. And William adores you, Amy pointed out. James says his grandfather hasn't been this engaged in years. You've given him something to be excited about. Her words stayed with me, adding another dimension to my decision. Beyond the professional opportunity, beyond the complicated family dynamics, there was the simple fact that my connection with William Montgomery mattered to him, and increasingly, to me as well. 2 months after the wedding, I met William for lunch at his penthouse to give him my answer. We sat on his terrace overlooking the lake, the autumn sun warming the air. I'd like to accept your offer, I told him. With some conditions. William's eyes twinkled. I expected nothing less. Let's hear them. I maintain my position at the Harrington. The consulting work can't interfere with my responsibilities there. Agreed. Complete curatorial independence. I decide which pieces are exhibited and how they're presented. Of course. And this is between us. Not contingent on my relationship with the rest of the family. William nodded slowly. You're worried they'll try to use this connection to manipulate you. I've seen how they operate, I said simply. Wise. William extended his hand. You have a deal, Jessica. Welcome to the Montgomery Foundation. As we shook hands, I felt I was beginning a new chapter, not just professionally but personally as well. William had become a mentor, almost a grandfather figure, filling a void I hadn't realized existed in my life. There's something else, William said, signaling to Sophia, who brought in a large flat package wrapped in archival paper. A gift to mark our new partnership. I unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small but exquisite drawing, unmistakably a preliminary sketch for the Fragonard painting I had restored. This has been in my personal collection since I was a young man, William explained. The companion to the painting you saved. I want you to have it. I can't accept this, I gasped, recognizing its immense value. It belongs in a museum, or with your family. It belongs with someone who will appreciate it for what it is, not what it's worth, William insisted. That's you, Jessica. Tears pricked my eyes as I carefully examined the delicate lines, the master's initial vision for what would become his masterpiece. Thank you. I'll treasure it. I know you will. William's expression grew serious. There's another reason I wanted you to have this. A reminder that sometimes what seems lost can be recovered. Damaged things can be restored. Including family legacies. I understood then that William saw me as more than a curator for his art collection. He hoped I might help restore something in his family as well. The values and substance he feared had been lost. 6 months after the wedding, much had changed. Amy and James had found their own home, a converted loft downtown, far from the suburban mansion where James had grown up. I had begun my work with the Montgomery Foundation, cataloging and preserving the family collection while planning a public exhibition for the following year. My relationship with the Montgomery family had evolved into something I never expected. Margaret and James Jr. maintained a polite respect, recognizing that William valued my expertise even if they didn't fully understand it. Madison and Elizabeth had eventually stopped their transparent attempts at friendship when I consistently declined their invitations, settling into a cordial but distant relationship. James, however, had become a true friend and ally. He shared William's appreciation for art and history and often joined our discussions about the collection. Through him, I saw William's hope for the future of the Montgomery legacy, not defined by wealth or status, but by substance and contribution. Most surprisingly, I had begun dating again. Daniel, a conservation scientist I met through work, approached relationships with the same care and attention to detail he brought to his profession. Unlike Michael, he valued my passion for my work, never threatened by my success or connection to the Montgomerys. On the 1-year anniversary of Amy's wedding, William hosted a small dinner at his penthouse, just Amy and James, myself and Daniel, and William himself. As we sat around his dining table, sharing stories and laughter, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in a single year. A toast, William proposed, raising his glass. To family, not defined by name or blood, but by shared values and mutual respect. We clinked glasses, and I caught Amy's eye across the table. She smiled, silently acknowledging how far we'd both come. Later, as Daniel and I walked along the lakefront, I told him the whole story, from my dread of attending the wedding alone to the moment William Montgomery bowed to me in front of his astonished family. "What a journey," Daniel said when I finished. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if you hadn't restored that particular painting?" Sometimes, I admitted. But I think the lesson wasn't about the painting itself. It was about staying true to myself even when others undervalued me. About finding worth in what I love and do well, not in others' perceptions. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of the lake as we walked hand in hand. My life had expanded in ways I never imagined that day I nervously prepared to attend my sister's wedding alone. I had gained not just professional opportunities, but deeper connections with William, with James and Amy, and now with Daniel. Most importantly, I had gained a stronger sense of my own value, independent of relationship status or social acceptance. The journey from wedding outcast to respected professional hadn't changed who I was. It had simply revealed it more clearly, to myself and to others. As I looked out over the water, I thought about all the women who might be facing similar moments of judgment or exclusion based on superficial criteria. If my story could help even one person stand taller in their truth, then sharing it was worthwhile. Have you ever had a moment when someone underestimated you, only to be proven completely wrong? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey from humiliation to vindication resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of unexpected turning points and powerful life lessons. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perceptions. Sometimes being underestimated is the perfect opportunity to truly shine. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay true to yourself no matter who's watching.